Joe Theismann, welcome back to T-Town. I hope all is well.
It's good. Thank you. It's good to catch up with you. So you had to squeeze in an Irishman. I think that's about the way you described it. But we have so many of the wonderful Alabama football players on our team. I think they become the foundation of what we want to do. But it's always good to talk football with you.
No doubt. And I'm going to spend some time. But now you know a lot about good food because you operate some businesses. What's the go-to dish for Super Bowl for you?
Fried chicken.
Oh,
I love fried chicken.
Me too.
Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans as a meal. But then you have to have the dip. You got to have the chips, and you have to have the dip, and that sort of gets you through the game. I'm a very nervous eater when I'm watching a football game, whether I'm at the game or not at the game. If I'm at home, I just can't sit still. I have to be moving all the time just to stay sort of calm to a degree.
Now, are you one of those guys that watches the game by yourself with a group of people? What's the preference for you?
Well, if I'm in a box, I'm watching the game with a group of people at a game. I don't get a chance to really sit in the stands much anymore. It gets a little crazy. So if I'm in a place where I have other people around me, I'm still walking around the box. If I'm at home, usually my wife and I sometimes will just watch it. Sometimes we have friends over. So in a lot of different types of environments, I have an opportunity to watch games. And if somebody's talking and I'm watching, I don't think twice about saying, hold it down, please, or just shut up. We're watching a football game. That's why we're here. If we wanted to have a discussion, go to another room in the house.
Joe, I'm just curious, being from a broadcaster standpoint and a quarterback standpoint, what do you think about Tony Romo's broadcasting transition?
I think Tony has transitioned this year in particular extremely well. He's fun to listen to. And to me, the most important thing in broadcasting is, number one, don't be too wordy. Number two, make it an enjoyable listen. When people tune into what you're doing. And number three, have they learned something? And I think Tony has filled those three criteria very well. I've enjoyed him, especially the game against the New England Patriots with the Pats in Kansas City, the latter part of that game. Some of the observations that he made were just downright astute. And it was a very enjoyable time. And I think Tony has caught on and understands the concepts of broadcasting. And I think he brings an awful lot to the booth.
I know this is going to sound like an elementary level question, but what makes Tom Brady so great?
I think his commitment to excellence would be one way to describe it. His preparation would be another way to commitment to excellence. His preparation is seamless. He leaves no stone unturned. He's been doing it for a long time, but yet he treats it like it's brand new in his life. The fact that he is in his 9th Super Bowl is no different than if this was his first one. And that's the way he's approaching it. It's an enthusiasm where he doesn't get complacent. And I think one of the other things you have to look at is his physical skills have not diminished. Most of us that have played the position or thrown the ball a lot, whether it be in baseball, whether it be in football, the arm has a certain amount of throws in it. I mean, that's all there is to it. I call him a genetic freak. I think Drew Brees has had his repaired, and I think they put a little bionic trigger into his. He keeps going at the age of 40. But for a lot of us that went through that part of our life into the late 30s and early 40s, you start to lose a little bit of that zip. I basically was able to throw the football very effectively till I was 50. And the reason I know that is because in the 2000 Super Bowl that was played in Tampa between the Giants and the Baltimore Ravens, I threw defensive drills for the Ravens on Wednesday. Brian Billick was a close friend of mine. I predicted the Ravens were going to win the Super Bowl. Brian said, "You believed in us. Why don't you come out to practice and throw drills?" And at the age of 50, I was able to do that. Shortly thereafter, it was over. So if Tom Brady says he wants to play to 50 or 45, don't discount the fact that he could possibly do that.
Joe, do you have a prediction in the Super Bowl?
I think New England's going to win this football game. The New England Patriots are playing the best football in the National Football League. The last 2 weeks, there hasn't been a team that's better. Tom hasn't been sacked. They've been extremely efficient. Their guys have held on to the football. Now, what I think Denver is going to do to try and counteract that is, first of all, the game sort of revolves through the offensive and defensive line. I think the Rams' defensive line has to play extremely well. New England's offensive line, I think, has to play well. Whichever side plays better could determine the outcome of this football game. If the Rams win, wouldn't be surprised if a defensive lineman was the MVP of the Super Bowl. On the other side, look for like a guy like Chris Hogan. We always look at the New England Patriots, and the guy we expect never really is the guy that winds up being the star. We saw it with James White. We've seen it with defensive backs times before. Malcolm Butler having the ability to make plays. I just, to me, I think it's going to be a great football game. I don't really, I think the first 5 minutes of this football game will give the viewers an opportunity to get a feel for what's going on. Will New England want to throw the football? And it's imperative if they do that their receivers hold on to the football. What will Todd Gurley do? Is he in this game mentally? Is he in the game physically? But there's also a third team out there that people don't realize, and that's the officiating crew. Excuse me. How much will 2 weeks ago's call in the Rams-New Orleans game affect the officiating in the Super Bowl?
Wow, great point. Great point. And do you think the NFL's got a problem on their hands and some of these judgment calls that they're kind of ignoring? And I know we see a lot at the college game as well.
Well, I don't think they're ignoring it. I think they're missing it. And certainly something has to be done to correct the egregious mistake that was made. Matter of fact, they missed 2 penalties on that particular play. They missed pass interference, and they missed a helmet-to-helmet contact. Now, historically, playoffs, the officials don't call things quite that close. That's why I'm saying I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the first 5 minutes. How will they call this game? Will they call it tight? Will there be 5 penalties in the first 5 minutes? Last year, the New England Patriots had 1 penalty called against them in the entire game. I hope they let them play. I hope there isn't a knee-jerk effect that says, okay, we need to go the other way. This is going to get called. That's going to get called. That would be more outrageous to the fans than the fans of the New Orleans Saints from last week or 2 weeks ago's football game. So I think that, to me, is the biggest unknown in this football game. That and Todd Gurley's mental and physical state. Where is he? We don't know. He's somewhat of a mystery.
Joe, did you learn more about yourself after a win or after a loss?
I think you learn more after a loss because you tend to go through the things that you did that would have given your team an opportunity to win. I had a little saying that sat in my locker, and I share this with young quarterbacks. I share it with guys that have played in this game. And it was a simple sign that it reminded me a lot about how I had to play the position. And it went like this. I never have to be the reason the team wins. I just can't be the reason it loses. And that encompasses the physical part of the game, the mental part of the game, the physiological part, the psychological part. It's all encompassed in that statement.
Joe, when you look at Tua Tagovailoa, what do you see?
I see a terrific college quarterback. I see a young guy who can make plays with his legs. He can make plays with his arms. He gets the ball out of his hands. But I just don't think he throws the ball with enough zip to be able to survive the NFL. And the windows that are not available. I did this I played poorly in Super Bowl 18. I think he made some decisions against Clemson in the championship game that he knows he wishes he had back. The second interception was just like, I'm going to throw it up in the air and whoever gets it is going to get it. That's not what he was thinking, but that was the end result. And as you watch the game, you're thinking, where's he throwing it? And who is he throwing it to? I think he's a terrific college quarterback. I think he's probably the odds-on favorite for the Heisman Trophy next year, unless Trevor Lawrence winds up, doing what he has done. But I don't know if a professional career is ahead for him. Now, he could physically change in the next year or so, which if he got stronger and bigger and threw the ball a bit harder, I'd say, yeah, he's got a chance. And there's another thing that gives him a chance. We don't have enough quarterbacks in the National Football League to be able to fill the roster spots. If you think about it, there's 7 teams in the next 2 years that need quarterbacks. The Chargers, the Giants, New England has to be looking. New Orleans has to consider it. The Chargers have to consider it. The Oakland Raiders, they have to consider it. The Washington Redskins have to consider it. And there are other teams. The Denver Broncos are looking. The Jacksonville Jaguars are probably in the market. So there's 8 teams that I've cited that are going to need a quarterback at least in the next couple of years, or they're going to have to recycle somebody through the National Football League that has not had success.
How much to do with what you're talking about is his height?
I think at the college level there's a bit of height. I mean, somebody may be pushed because of the visibility of the games they play or the position they play. I think Ian Book is a good young quarterback. Still has developmental, he has to develop certain things in his game. I think Trevor Lawrence is another one who's going to get better and better and better. The wide receivers made some great catches, made them great against Notre Dame in the semis, made great catches against Alabama in that game. You don't get that all the time, so you have to put the ball in places where it's a little bit easier for people to get it. But there's always hype. I mean, go all the way back to when I was in college. My last name was changed from Theismann to Theismann to rhyme with the trophy, to try and get the Heisman Trophy. So going back all the way into the 1970s, you're dealing with hype.
Well, and I may have misspoke, but height is – I was talking about his height as far as being a shorter quarterback. Do you think that's a big problem for him?
I think it's an issue. I think Kyler Murray should stay to baseball. I think he's going to struggle at the NFL level. I love his improvisational skills. I love the way he throws the football. But if you're 5'8", it's a tough place to occupy. And if you think you're just going to run away from all these people, I mean, we have defensive linemen that run 4.4. We've got 285-pound guys that are 6'4" that run 2.4, that run 4.45. You're not going to run away from many of these guys. And you give defensive coaches a chance in the NFL to study you, they're going to figure out what you don't do well. Remember something very important, the difference between college football and professional football. College football, coaches only have 20 hours to work with their players. So they can only be coached basically 16 of those hours because 4 of them, oddly enough, happen to be the game. So you get 16 hours to work with a kid during the course of a week. In the National Football League, defensive coaches, I've been around defensive coaches, invest 100 hours in preparing game plans. 5 times the amount of time goes into studying and analyzing you. What do you do well? That's why I'm so curious next year. What will Sam Darnold look like? What will Baker Mayfield look like? What will Lamar Jackson look like in year 2 when people have a book on what they can do?
Well, it's certainly, and maybe we're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, we've had some big-time quarterbacks here, but not in recent memory. A.J. McCarron was certainly a guy that did a great job here winning. So you think looking ahead to the 2020 draft, you couldn't see Tua being like a number 1, number 2, number 3 type pick. Are we putting that hype way too much? Because
I think it's way too early. Like I said, you're talking a year and a half of development for a young man. A lot can change for him over this period of time. I know at Alabama's program, I mean, there isn't an Alabama kid that I've met that I don't admire. I think Nick and his staff and the university do a terrific job, not only bringing in football players, allowing football players to join the National Football League that are quality players, but they're all quality people. My hat's off to the entire program at Tuscaloosa and what they do with their programs. I think it's great. And this will serve these young men so much better in life than just, say, a career in the world of professional football. But I think it's way too early to project the 2020 place for Tua. I think there's always going to be a place for someone who can win. I think there's always an opportunity. I mean, look at with the Dallas Cowboys. Kellen, the kid that came out of BYU, he's the offensive coordinator now. Never started, hardly played, not a big guy. But yet, he's in a position with an organization that is very, very influential and very powerful. So what's going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now, wouldn't even want to predict it.
Hey, Joe, final thing, and we always appreciate the insight that you can bring. We love talking football, as you know, here in Tuscaloosa. We do it 20 hours a week. Just want to make sure I'm giving you a chance. You're in Atlanta. What are you there to promote? What are you there to talk about? Just the game that you love, or is there something else?
It's really the game I love. I spent 7 hours on Radio Row yesterday. Everybody kept saying, "What are you promoting?" And not that I had a movie that premiered this past Saturday called Snow Coming on the Hallmark Channel. It's still running this week to a degree. So if you're a Hallmark Channel fan, you can check out. I played an agent. I just love football. I love talking about it. I'm a football junkie. I always have. I loved practice. I loved when I was broadcasting. I couldn't get enough information. I want to learn so much. I love to analyze the game. I analyzed the Notre Dame Clemson game. I analyzed the Alabama Clemson game. I analyzed.
All right. So what went wrong? Because listen, we're still picking up the pieces here. I mean, we feel like we got kicked in the teeth. It's the worst loss since 1997 for the University of Alabama. What went wrong? What did we do wrong in that game?
Well, the way I look, it isn't so much what you did wrong. It's a lot what Clemson did right. First of all, I don't think Alabama's so used to getting such a lead on people. And, remember, how much do the starters play at Alabama? In a lot of your games, Tua didn't play. When's the last, I think, was a championship game? It was like the series. Wasn't that the first time he actually played a fourth quarter?
Well, no, he played some in LSU, but it wasn't much.
Okay.
Yeah, it was limited, very limited.
But your quarterback plays 3/4 of football and doesn't really get a chance to play in crunch time. And then I thought I always felt this particular year, as I watched games, I felt like Alabama's secondary was very susceptible to the pass, which is very unusual when you think of where Nick has hung his hat as a defensive coach, particularly in the defensive backfield. And I felt like the lack of pressure up front to get Trevor out of some type of a rhythm really created a problem defensively. Offensively, you couldn't do the things that you've done. I think with Alabama, sometimes you're on such a roll, you're so good, you get flying along, and all of a sudden, and you really don't play necessarily the competition that is at your level. And then because you're not hardened, because you haven't had a close game, you start, the Citadel had them at 10-10, and then it was over. But, I mean, if you look at Alabama, and heck, I wouldn't think they wanted to apologize for getting big leads and scoring points the way they do. But the pedal never stays to the metal. It doesn't have to. And I think that might have caught up with them a little bit when it came to the championship game.
It's a great analysis. Joe Theismann, best way to connect with him on the Twitter account, Theismann7. You're so kind with your time, and we greatly appreciate it here in T-Town.
Brian, it's always great catching up with you. Take care. It should be a great weekend of football.